Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Cleaning Lady Season 3, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously, this is the episode of Tony having to juggle a lot. She already had to juggle plenty before, but it's just like every time she takes a step forward, it feels like she takes 2 steps back. Because obviously picking up where the last episode left off, there's a whole situation of she's being watched by Child Protective Services now because of everything. Her position as mom is being questioned, and now it's like, right, you gave your son this medication that it isn't 100% sure if it's okay, but it's like if he didn't have it, he would have died. So now it's going to come into question whether or not she's a good mom. And it's like, yeah, we typically lean into having the parents be there, but, be in their child's life, but we got to look out for what's best for the child. And it's like, right, you're going to need some witnesses to say how good of a mother you are. It's like, oh, how about your sister-in-law, Fiona? It's like, oh, that'd be great if she wasn't in the Philippines right now. Can't let on about that. I mean, the fact of the matter is the people that could be the best character witnesses for Tony are out of the picture. I mean, it's complicated, but Armand could be one. I mean, but granted, I doubt that'd be one you want to throw out there because of his criminal connections and stuff like that. That'd be looked into and stuff, so that's kind of a no. Garrett, it'd be pretty respectable having an FBI agent back you up, but Garrett's dead. So then you add in, Fiona's like the only real viable option. I mean, it's family members, but like having other character witnesses would be, like I said, Armand's just be a weird one, but I think Garrett would be an interesting one if possible. But like I said, none of them are options right now, regardless. So she's in that kind of tough spot. She wants to go meet with Ramona, but turns out, hey, she came to find you when you went looking for her. Because in fact, the Angel who she met trying to get in went to him first and then used him to get in contact with the cartel that Ramona works for. He was kind of like threatening her because it's like, yeah, you bring a lot of heat my direction. It's like, yeah, like what is your connection to them? Because they picked you up and just kind of bounced with you, Tony. You seem like you were nobody, but obviously you're somebody. But Tony was able to defend herself by being like, hey, you say I'm important to them. Go ahead and pull the trigger and see what happens to you. And Angel didn't want that smoke. But by the time Tony comes back, Ramona's waiting for her. I was wondering, I was like, oh, your friend. I was like, is it going to be Nadia? Didn't expect Ramona to be the one there. But it is kind of like, hey, showing up at my place unannounced. I was looking for you. You could have easily waited till I got back home. You could have easily gotten in contact with me other ways. But you chose this way because you were trying to make a point. It's like, oh, your boy's so cute and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, we're looking for Armand. The fact of the matter is, leave it in our hands. And it's like, that's the thing of there's so much out of Tony's control. Looking for Armand, all she can do is trust Ramona to do it, which she has a vested interest to find Armand. They're family, so it makes sense. But also she has to ask Ramona for help getting Chris and Fiona from the Philippines. And it's like, right, you're gonna have to do work for us. And it's like, right, I'll do it for you what I do with Armand. And it's like, well, she cleans up crime scenes. Well, this time they wanted her to go a little further than just cleaning up the crime scene. They wanted her to dispose of the bodies. Because, she's typically like, hey, I show up after the body's been disposed of. Now she actually had to get to disposing of the body. I think it helps being a doctor. I mean, granted, you've been cleaning up crime scenes for him plenty enough, so it's not that bad. But even disposing of a body, it's like you're pushing yourself I got to do this for the sake of my family, sake of Armand. I'm gonna do all this. Plus, on top of that, it's kind of like, well, if I don't do it, I'm screwed. 3, you're a doctor, so you have a little more experience on cutting up bodies to some extent, so it's, I mean, not to this extent, but you've been pushed to the edge over 2 seasons of crazy shit in your life, so it's like, what's one more thing? But it's like, yeah, having to just not only cut up the body and dispose of it, going full Breaking Bad, disposing of the body with sulfuric acid. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, considering the drive there. She was talking to Jorge. I guess that's also why she didn't want, Jorge was like, no, you don't need to bring your stuff, because oh, you think you're just cleaning up a crime scene? No, we got everything prepared for you because you're going to do a lot more than you typically do. But yeah, her and Jorge had some very interesting talks, it's like, oh, came up about, Marco, Luca's dad being gone, obviously didn't dive into the story behind how that situation came to be. But then it's like, yeah, how, it's like, oh, when I met Armand, I thought he was going to kill me. Him not killing that meeting made it so that my son's alive today. So him and, her and Jorge were kind of connecting over like children because he's a father himself, and his daughter seems to have like medical situations too because he went to the hospital as well. I mean, I think that's what that whole conversation was about. Not that was about someone else, but I could have sworn they were talking about like being parents of children who sadly have sicknesses and spending sadly probably too much time in hospitals related to it, and just kind of like the roughness of that. So. But Jorge, like, he opens up a little bit, but he also makes sure... Because it's interesting, because it feels like they're definitely setting up Jorge to be a little Armand-ish. I don't know. Once again, I'm not trying to, like, say this. It's this early in the season. I mean, because who knows where the story is going to go, but... Like, he feels like they're potentially setting him up to fill that Armand void. Because Armand, like, didn't care about Tony until, like, he spent more and more time with her. But, and... Jorge is just kind of like, it's like, yeah, it might be simple just to like put a bullet in her and bury her, but like Ramona's the one that has such a vested interest in her, because it turns out, because at first she's like, I don't get your games, like what games are you playing with Tony? Don't do that. Because I guess, well, she makes it clear it's because when they do find Armand, it's like, we don't want one of the people he obviously cares about, because there's obviously something there. She doesn't really get into it, but she knows like there's something special between Tony and Armand. Like she seems like such a normal lady with sick kid. It's like there's got to be more to it for Armand to go out of his way above and beyond for her. So it's like, he's married, but for him to go out of his way for this woman, Tony, it's like there's got to be something more, right? So, but she's gonna use this as an opportunity of, yeah, like once Armand is back, we'll be a family again, because like Eduardo is the reason why we had to split. Like Jorge, you and Armand were so young when the family basically split the way it did. So that wasn't Armand's decision. Bring him back into the fold and we can be family again. It's like, and it's like, then you'll realize just how good of a relationship you guys have. But Jorge's fighting it because it's like, family's important and all, but it just, for him, it's like, yeah, blood is fine and everything, but I don't know him. Like, we haven't been around each other in like decades. So why would I want to have anything to do with him? It's just like, Jorge's just in it for himself of like, I'm doing what I'm going to do to survive, plus I got to do what's best for my daughter. Same thing for Tony. It's so ironic that he's like, yeah, like Tony's desperate because she's got all these spinning plates of, oh, her daughter, a sick kid looking for Armand. It's like she's desperate, and desperate people could like cause issues. It's interesting too because like I think that's going to be the parallel of Jorge and Tony, is just like they are in very, very similar boats. In some ways, but obviously not in all ways. But there are parallels between those characters, and I think I think that's going to foster an interesting relationship. Like I said, it just seems like he's definitely approaching Tony in a similar manner to Armand, but obviously he's also trying not to get too close to her, which Armand did the same thing too. But I don't know. I doubt it's going to turn anything obviously romantic, but I just think it's like he might be the soft spot. Who knows? Maybe Ramona actually will be, but because it could be a toss-up, because Ramona feels like she's going to be like the like, I'm going to play cool, but like I can be like, I haven't really even begun to show you who I really am. I'm not the Jefe for any, like, I'm Jefe for a reason. I'm running things for a reason. So Tony hasn't seen her dark side yet. Like, Jorge has made himself pretty scary in this episode, not only to Tony, but also Nadia. Makes sense, but we haven't really seen Ramona's scary side, but her introduction and just like her demeanor, also like her just like sitting down with Luca, that was kind of meant to make a point, so there's a lot there, but it feels like it could be a toss-up between which one ends up being a little nicer when it comes to Tony. I'm betting a lot on Jorge, but because it feels like Ramona's going to be like the whole, even though they're kind of in the positions they're in right now where Jorge's like, let's just cut our losses, like why get in bed with like this woman, like we don't really know her, like what's your game? But Ramona's the one kind of playing the game. So, but I feel like those roles could easily switch where Jorge could come to be like, yeah, actually this lady, I feel for her, I do want to help her out, just like Armand, but Ramona, like, it could be a thing of like, oh, you cross a line, you cause me some issues, and I can be that, I can be your worst nightmare if push comes to shove type of situation. So I am curious why the cops showed up when they did. Maybe there was some noise like when Jorge took them Angel and his squad out, because even though Tony didn't tell them anything, it was still like too much of a loose end. They already knew that Tony had some connection to them, and even if they would have probably been pressing and they probably were questioning something. It's like, now that there's a drawn connection to us, it could be an issue, because it was also the point of why Ramona had brought up the whole point to Tony of like, we have to be careful not to let anyone know about Armand's connection to her, because if anyone has him, they could use him as leverage and use him as like, oh, like to get their way. So she would have to choose between the business and their operations or her nephew. So that's the concern about it. So you have to protect yourself. You have to remove any like potential weaknesses any competitors or could use against you. So that's why Angel and them had to be wiped out, because we don't know what they actually know. Even though they knew nothing, they still knew Tony had some connection in some capacity, especially like when Tony threatened him, being like, yo, kill me and see what happens. She's able to play that card because it's like, well, there is a through line there, and it's like, that is still some knowledge you don't want getting out there to your ops, you know? So once again, like, you have to be careful about who knows what knowledge, so they had to be removed. So that sucks. Which also ties into Nadia's side of things, where she's just calling up everyone, looking at missing persons reports, calling up anyone she can, looking at morgues and stuff, trying to find Armand. She was even about to file a missing person report. Funny enough, when you look at that list, I'm not going to remember all of them, but if you look at the top of like 6 or so of that list, you're like, technically Armand's situation could technically fall under this. Like, oh, do you know that he's been kidnapped by someone dangerous? Is he in a very clearly dangerous situation? This and that. It's like the top 6 on that list. It's like, man, Armand's situation could technically fall into any of these 6. So any and all of them in that, amongst those 6. So that's interesting. But before she got the call of, hey, there's some body that looks like it could be Armand's body, but it's not. Of course it wouldn't be. But it was a setup for Jorge to talk to her. Because it's like, yo, you need to stop doing what you're doing, because you're drawing all this attention to Armand, and obviously they're looking for Armand, and I guess if word gets out like, oh, this guy you're looking for, someone is asking a whole bunch of questions. It's like, because once you get the police involved, that kind of complicates things, because we're trying to find Armand first, but if we're out there sniffing for Armand and then the police get involved, that could easily get the police involved in our situation. Actually, I need to circle back really quickly, because I never finished what I was saying about Angel and his crew. Kind of in that same vein of like, but why were the cops showed up? Did they hear like Jorge taking them out? Or was there something else that drew them there? Like, did they hear some noise? Luckily, Tony like poured paint over a blood spot. She gotten rid of the bodies at that point in time, and unless they actively go out of their way looking, they won't find anything. But she wasn't able to properly clean everything like she wanted to. So it does leave enough evidence. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's gonna come looking under that paint. I don't know. Like I'm sure. I don't know if. I'd assume they'd still be able to pull blood samples from underneath that paint, but you'd have to go looking, knowing like, oh, I need to look underneath this paint or look through this paint. I don't know if it would destroy the DNA and all that. I mean, it might not have just been paint. It looked like it might have just been paint, but I don't know. So there's a lot where you almost feel like that could circle back around. Because like no one else questioned that of like, why did the cops show up when they did? So it's like, was that part of a setup, or just to put her in a very like precarious situation, or is it just a byproduct of Jorge killing them and somehow somebody heard? Or just, I mean, I guess maybe word is already out that that's where like Angel and his people do business, so it's already on the police radar, so maybe that's an angle to it. Just once again, things just not going Tony's way, and it just all happening at once. I guess it's just, you know, obviously from a storytelling perspective, is to put more pressure on Tony, but I'm just so curious why they decided to show up and why then exactly. Then you have things complicated even more because Nadia goes to visit Tony because Tony hasn't told Nadia anything. It's like, from one perspective, it's like, well, you probably should. You should probably tell her, but it's like, well, you tell her anything because even Jorge was like, did you tell her anything? Good, because if you do, you're dead, she's dead. So Tony's doing her a favor and Tony's looking out for herself. I mean, it's more so looking out for yourself, but it's also like, despite their issues, she doesn't hate Nadia because it's also like, right, you're looking for Armand too, you care about him. It's like, we're in the same boat, so like, I'm not going to do that to you. But it's like, it's a give and take of, I understand why you didn't say anything, but you probably should let her know what's what, because if you don't, it leads to her doing what she's doing because she knows something's going on with Tony. It's like, no, just forget it. She's like, I'm looking to protect me and my family. You should be doing the same because these people can and will kill us if we get mixed up with them. But it's like, I don't know if Nadia's put it together. Like, are you working with them? It's like, because I'm sure from Nadia's perspective, it's like, if you let me know that you were working with them to find Armand, it'd be all kosher. But she's also coming from the perspective of maybe they know where Armand is. It's like, well, it doesn't seem like they do because once again, they were like, especially Jorge, he was looking for him. Not less Ramona, it's like playing a game and she is actually the one that has him. I don't think so, but I'll keep that back in my mind. But I don't think Jorge, because he's the one that asked Tony last episode about him. So not unless that's him playing coy, but I feel like the one that's most likely to be playing coy is Ramona, but we'll have to wait and see. But I wonder who does have Armand. Is he just low-key, like, underground, or is it just a situation of underground as in, like, he's hiding, or does someone actually have him? That's unclear. Feels more likely like someone would have him type of situation more so than he's laying low. But yeah, because Nadia felt like she was kind of on her own, which is so interesting because I brought up it last episode, like, oh, it seemed like this was going to be the Nadia and Tony season getting closer, but it's like, no, they're kind of further apart. In fact, they're on opposite sides of things. Tony is linked up with the cartel, whereas Nadia goes and turns to Catherine. But it makes a lot of sense. They were setting up that seed last episode of most likely she would turn to. I mean, it's kind of, I guess, almost supposed to be that parallel of Tony's connection to Garrett. And so Nadia is going to use Catherine to go after the cartel, even though the cartel's the ones looking for Armand for Tony, but Tony can't tell her because no one's supposed to know about, because Nadia's not the type to let stuff go, so she's going to be asking questions, and it's probably going to complicate things, once she finds out, wait, they're looking for Armand, Armand's aunt's the one that runs the cartel, I'm going to have to start, like, pushing the feds in the wrong direction, so she's probably going to have to like play both sides of the fence just like Tony did when it came to Garrett and Armand. So like she's probably going to be in a similar boat, maybe. I mean, to be fair, if they find out, they already knew she was going to like go put in a missing person. They knew all that she was doing looking for Armand already, so they're eventually going to find out about her getting in contact with the feds, and that's going to end disastrously. So we'll have to wait and see. But that's everything stateside. Obviously, back in the Philippines, Chris is kind of enjoying everything because he's getting to kind of see, more of his, like where his mom grew up and like more about its culture. But she's trying to slowly, unveil like, oh yeah, like let me teach you something. Like let me tell you something that's pretty important. And the thing was about Paolo. And they actually meet. Granted, it's not the greatest circumstances of, oh, yeah, like someone being like, oh, is that Enoch? And it's like, Enoch, that's what you call me. That means son. It's like, wait, is this my dad? Which he's frustrated because it's like, you made it seem like you didn't really know Paolo. Which he even says like, yeah, Paolo and I, like they were together for like 5 months. Which isn't to say anything. That doesn't mean like, oh my God, we were in love. Even later on, her parents asked her, she's like, I don't know. But to be fair, at the time, she was going through a lot because she was like, what you guys did. Because they did kick her out, didn't they? When they found, because she was a teenager when she was pregnant. So they kicked her out. And she was like probably telling them that Paolo was the father. That wouldn't have done great. So she kept that to herself and just did what she thought she could. And I love the parallel. Obviously, it's like a lot for Fiona because she blames herself. I mean, especially because like her and Chris have already had like, they've constantly like, her and Jazz have always had the best relationship. Her and Chris have always had like a very complicated relationship. I mean, especially through all the shit Chris has been through. Like, I mean, I brought it up back, especially in season 1, he was a little shit. But it's also like, right, you're a teenager, you're kind of a little ungrateful, especially not knowing everything his mom's done for him. You kind of take it for granted. Especially when it's like, hey, your mom was gone and there's no guarantee she could make it back to the U.S. So there's that. But now it's also like, oh, you lied to me. You made it seem like you didn't really know my dad. It's like, well, obviously you and Paolo had some deep enough connection. All these years later, you still have that. Well, she also has the feeling of, well, you're my baby daddy and you're the father of my child, and I just have awkward feelings about, that obviously eventually let him know. But it does seem like there's also feelings there too. Like, he definitely feels them. But Paolo and Chris do have a conversation. It's like, oh, let me teach you about, like, for him, it's like cooking. I'm assuming like he was talking about his dad is like the reason why he's able to cook. It's like, it's kind of what saved him. He doesn't blame Fiona about not telling him, because he's like, yo, I was not in a good place. I was just kind of me, back then, and it wouldn't have done any good for you. In fact, your mom gave up so much. I mean, when you really think about what she gave up, she left everything behind that she knew and loved, and those who loved her, for the sake of giving you the best opportunity. Because it's like, me being in the picture wouldn't have done you great, because he's like, it worked out best for you to meet me now versus me then. And then on top of that, like, you had the best opportunities, and that's all your mom ever wanted for you. And he recognizes that. He recognizes, like, right, I was so caught up in my own feelings, I never put myself in her shoes of, yeah, it's not the easiest thing. Because even Paolo says, like, to do what your mom did takes a lot of courage. A lot of people would want to do it, but taking the courage to actually do it is something not a lot of people have been able to do. So just shows, like, how brave Fiona was to take that leap, But now they're on a time crunch, just as Paolo's getting introduced to Chris. Chris is getting introduced to Paolo. Like, Fiona regrets things of like, oh, maybe we could have had this sooner if I had made things clearer back in the day. Chris would have already known more about Paolo, and maybe Paolo could have known this entire time about Chris. But now they're on a tight schedule because of Ramona. They were able to kind of like get everything expedited, so they have the tickets, they're gonna like meet up with the Coyote and stuff like that. So it's like a plane ticket and the Coyote conjunction has all been set in place. But like, Fiona wanted a little more time in the Philippines just to figure stuff out, because obviously she didn't know where Chris was for a bit, which is like, you've never been here. It's really stupid of you to wander off on your own, especially like, because there's certain parts of a lot of countries are like, you don't go there by yourself. What do locals would know, yeah, you don't go there. Someone who's never been there might make a mistake and step into some territory you don't know about. I mean, luckily it didn't happen like that, but that was really foolish. Once again, Chris is an idiot teenager. You're likely to do stupid stuff like that. But regardless of being mad or not, you let your emotions get the best of you. I understand you're not thinking logically, but still. When it's all said and done, though, you could feel that they were trying to be like, oh, could we push this a little bit? And Tony's like, no. Like, I'm literally going above and beyond to make this happen. So I need you to kind of, no, you can't miss this, because it took a lot to make this happen. And if this kind of gets screwed up in any shape or form, we're all relatively fucked in a lot of ways. I mean, granted, it means they could stay in the Philippines for a little bit, but it's like Tony needs them back because, well, she wants to know that they're going to be okay and safe. There's that. But also, she needs Fiona back because she's juggling a lot. So things are going to have to change the moment she comes back. You're going to want to keep her as out of this as possible. But also, to like make this all possible, you had to work with the cartel. So you're definitely not telling Fiona, even though there's supposed to be no more secrets. But like, obviously, your connection to all of this led to Fiona getting like deported in the first place. I mean, she was already pretty close to getting deported back in, I think that was that season 1? She almost got deported, but wasn't it like one of their friends did actually get deported, but like Fiona was so close to it previously. So it's just, it's a lot. So Tony's, and she doesn't have anyone she can confide into because, well, she doesn't have Garrett, she doesn't have Armand, she can't confide in her sister-in-law Fiona, she can't confide in Nadia. She has to keep this all to herself. I mean, that's when we got the end of the episode where she's just staring into the mirror. It's a lot that's on her shoulders alone. At least she could carry shoulder this burden with Armand, and she's had him to be that person she could shoulder so much with these past 2 seasons, even though it was kind of that, back and forth between being like her obligations to Garrett, her obligations to Armand, who she trusts, who she's really siding with. But now it's like even more so because once again Garrett's gone, so don't really have the backing of the FBI anymore, especially because Catherine doesn't like you for getting Garrett killed, and now Armand's missing, and you're just shouldering all that alone, plus the whole situation of, yeah, my child could potentially get taken from me, but if Fiona's around, that might help. But if I'm mixed up in this business, like, they could have random stop-bys of, oh, let's, wellness check type of situation, so she knows of one that's coming up soon, so there's that, but they're random at any point in time, so balancing that with her debt to the cartel, because like she's talking to Jorge like, oh, well, I asked you for 2 favors, if I do 2 jobs, this is all gonna be kosher. And Jorge's like, no. But for one, Ramona wants her close, so it's like the more you keep her indebted, the closer she's there. But also it's like, I doubt Jorge would go so above and beyond like that, like so hard in the paint, being like, no. Especially considering, like, well, one of the favors she's asking for is looking for Armand and his family, but it's like, yeah, she's good at what she does, so they're probably going to make extra sure not to ever let her go, so I don't even think that's, like, it partially Ramona's situation, but also partially not, so it's some interesting developments on that front, so we'll see if there's going to be any hang-ups with Fiona and Chris getting back to the States, or will that be seamless? I don't have a feeling like it will be. I feel like there's going to be some complications there, but it's just because, once again, it's just like when it rains, it pours, and it's just like Tony's just, it's like I said, it's just one thing after another because so much is spiraling, and we're only 2 episodes into the season, and it's already kind of this bad already for Tony, and it's only going to get worse, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.